Save money, cook healthier by making your own chicken stock. Hey folks, this is Casey and I am One Mellow Marigold. Welcome to my kitchen. For the last 3 days, I have been emptying my freezer of these and making a whole lot of this, and I thought I'd bring you along for the ride. Making your own chicken stock is a really easy way to add both flavor and nutrients to your cooking. In fact, the whole process is so versatile. I want you to stick around for the whole video because I'm going to show you the way I do it because it's what makes sense for me and how I live. But I'm going to show you a ton of variations along the way so you can make it your own project. Let's talk about the supplies you'll need. Obviously, you'll need a chicken carcass. This is just a rotisserie chicken that I stuck in the freezer after I was done with it. You may also want to add a bunch of vegetable scraps. I'm going to put up on the screen here a whole bunch of options for you. For me here in my household, it's most often root vegetable scraps and celery because those are just vegetables that we eat a ton of often. Variation 1, don't add vegetables. You can just make chicken stock with the chicken carcass. And of course, the opposite variation is also true. You can ditch the chicken and just use veggie scraps. In addition, I'm going to add some bay leaves and peppercorns to the mix. And some folks really like to add onion. I personally don't add onion because I'm not the only one in my household who eats the chicken stock. I also feed it to my 2 small dogs, Oliver and Hilda, often. And dogs and onions are not a great combo. So I just leave that out. If you're going to be pressure canning along with me, you'll need your canning supplies, of course, the canner, and some clean quart jars. You're going to want some cheesecloth. This is the kind that you might buy from the store, sort of single use only. You can also buy reusable washable cheesecloth, which I actually personally like. Seems to filter a little bit more. And of course, you're going to need a stock pot. I use my big old one, but if you're just making a small batch, use a smaller stock pot. And then last but not least, we're also going to need some sort of straining tool. So you could use something like this. You could use something like this. You could use a colander lined with the cheesecloth. You've got options. That might seem like a lot, but honestly, once you get into the habit of doing this, it's no big deal. Okay, less yapping, more doing. Day 1 is the absolute easiest process. You take your contents, you put it in your pot, you cover it with water, and you simmer it away all day. That's it. It's just all you do on day 1. One way that I make this whole process easier in my house is as soon as I am done with my roasted chicken, I throw it in a plastic bag. Or like the rotisserie chicken, I just throw it into the freezer right in that clamshell that it comes in. And then over the weeks, as I'm cooking other vegetables, I throw in all the little scrap ends of my veggies right into that same bag. And when I got a full freezer or a full bag, that's when I know it's time to make stock. I've got my pot filled up. I've added my bay leaves and my peppercorns. Burner's turned on. We're going to bring this whole thing up to a low boil. And you're not going to want like a high rolling boil because that's really just going to like evaporate a lot of the liquid right away. You want a low boil, and once I get it going, I even then turn it down to sort of a high simmer. The point of having this simmer on your stove all day long is to keep that heat going long enough that it leaches out all the collagen and yummy nutrients from inside those chicken bones. So you're going to let this go all day long. What I do is I get up in the morning, I fill it up, I let it go until I go to bed, and then all I do is turn the burner off and just let it sit and cool down overnight. Your stock on day 2 should look something like this. It should be fully cooled down. And yes, there might be sort of this like film, this whitish film that you see. Some of that is going to be fat that has cooled and re-solidified. And some of that is going to be strained out through the straining process. For straining today, I'm actually using the reusable cheesecloth. I personally find it strains a lot better than the single-use stuff I showed you earlier, but to each their own, whatever works best for you. I clip it using binder clips to a colander because you've got so much solids coming out of your stock. You don't want the cheesecloth to like slip down inside the pot because that defeats the whole point of doing the straining. And if you ask me how I know that, lots of practice. Just lots of practice and lots of spilled chicken stock. So I'm going to take my ladle and I scoop out most of the solids first and put them into the cheesecloth and colander. That way I can sort of pour the rest in and it doesn't like end up splashing all over the place. When you've got everything in your next pot, you're just going to lift that strainer away and discard your solids. The next step for day 2 is we're going to do a skimming process. So we're going to put that freshly strained stock back on the stovetop, low heat, and we're going to bring it to a very low simmer. You're going to need a couple of supplies. I have one of these things. Honestly, I don't even know where this came from. I don't know what it's called, but it's really handy, if you don't have something like this, you can also use a slotted spoon and like just wrap around a little cheesecloth. And then I also grab a bowl and I just fold up a paper towel in the middle. That's it. And as you look at your chicken stock back on the stove, it should have just a lovely golden color. There's no specific color that this has to be. And the color might even change depending on the seasonings you put on your chicken and the veggies you put in your stock. It is going to have a slightly cloudy look. After about 2 hours on that low simmer, your chicken stock is going to have this frothy, weird gray substance that floats to the top. This isn't bad. It doesn't look pleasant. I will admit, this does not look pleasant. This is why I skim it. All of this stuff is just a combination of bits of parts that didn't break down during the cooking process. My understanding is that most of this substance is like the tendons and connective tissues that just don't fully break down. There is nothing bad about this. In fact, you can skip this step altogether if you have no patience, no time, you just don't want to do it. It means your broth is going to be a little cloudier than the final product we do here, but it's not going to hurt you. It doesn't taste bad. Everything is just fine. Some folks, though, really like to get as clear of a filter as they possibly can on their chicken broth. So when I have the time, I definitely do it. So after a couple hours, when you notice that foam, you are just going to use your strainer and you're going to skim along the top. And I just dump the contents right out onto that paper towel. And then when I'm all done, I throw it away. Once you skim the surface once, it'll take maybe about another half hour, 45 minutes for sort of another layer to float back up. And honestly, by the third time, I find that there's not that much more left. First time is going to be the biggest skim. The second time should be about the same. And by the third time you do it, it should be just minuscule. Once you're done skimming, you can turn off the burner and let your stock cool down. If there's still time in day 2 to filter it that second time, great. Now's your chance. Get out some clean cheesecloth, line your colander, do the same thing again, just filter it one more time. Honestly, by the time I'm getting around to doing the skimming in my day, it's usually the evening, so I tend to just leave this for day 3. I've done my second strain. I got all my supplies ready. This is just a reminder that if you have hot broth, you need hot jars and a hot canner. If you have cold broth, you need cold jars and a cold canner. And I promise some variations for folks that don't want to do canning, don't have the space for it, don't have the money for it, don't have the time for it, or just want to do small batches. So here's a couple of options if you don't want to can. A great option is freezing. If you have jars, and not just these kind of canning jars, but literally like any kind of jar, you can freeze your stock, filling up the jar, making sure you leave a good 1.5 inch space up at the top for expansion while it freezes. Another thing I love are these silicone bags. They're really strong. They're super durable. They've got an expendable bottom and these little clippy things that just slide over the top. I think these are kind of awesome because you don't have to worry about breakage, if you drop it on the floor, blah, 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 whatever. And then, of course, there's another option. Yeah, ice cubes, broth cubes, if you will. You know how sometimes you go to the store and they have those little concentrated, like, tablespoon little cups of broth? Yeah, you can do something similar. What you might choose to do is simmer down your stock until it gets really concentrated. This is a great idea for folks that don't have a ton of freezer space but love to do a lot of cooking and need something really convenient. So you let this down until it is thick and super golden, and then you pour it right into your ice cube trays, freezing as you go. You might have to do multiple batches throughout the day, and then you can go ahead and throw those cubes into your silicone bag, into a jar, into a Tupperware, into a whatever, and just chuck them in your freezer. And then you're only taking out a little cube, adding it to your saucepan or what have you, whatever you're making, and there you go. Before I got a pressure cooker, I used the freezing method. So I would make smaller batches at a time, maybe just 2 to 3 quarts, and I would save space in my freezer and just put them right in the quart jars. And when I needed one, you pull one out and just let it thaw in your sink or in the refrigerator. Now, of course, the last variation is you can just use it now. Like, you can just make a batch, maybe a little bit smaller. Let's say you're getting ready for the holidays. You're having a big dinner, a dinner party. You're going to be using a lot of chicken stock anyway. Go ahead and make yourself a big batch. I would then recommend adding at least a teaspoon or so of salt to it, but you can keep it in your refrigerator just fine for 3 to 5 days. So there you go. Lots of options. No excuse not to make your own chicken stock. Let's get this last load canned up. filled everybody to 1-inch headspace. We wiped our rims in vinegar. We added clean, fresh lids. We screwed on our bands fingertip tight. And now we're putting them into the pressure canner. We're gonna get our top on. And I have a gauge on my pressure canner. We're gonna turn up the heat to start bringing the pressure up inside. If your elevation is under 1,000 feet, you can at 10 pounds. If you are over that elevation like I am, you're gonna wanna do it at 15. If you have a gauge canner like mine, instead of a weighting gauge, you know, the knob that it's technically safe to can at 11 pounds. So that's what I'm doing. And just like that, we're all done. Easy peasy. I know this kind of felt like maybe a lot of steps if you haven't done it before, but trust me when I say, you're just going to get into a routine about the whole thing once you get started. You're going to be like, oh, this is really so easy. I should definitely do this more. All in, all the batches that I did combined, 16 quarts of beautiful golden chicken stock. It's shelf stable. I can just pull a quart whenever I need it. What do I use it for? Everything, literally everything with it. I even feed it to my dogs. All of that collagen and those good vitamins are really good for them too. So they get it with their dinner sometimes. But I cook rice with this. I cook pasta with this. Any soups and stews, obviously, this is going to be my base. I cook and simmer my greens in this. Occasionally, I will braise meats with this. And it just adds so much flavor. It's just a win-win. It's just a win-win all around. I would love to hear from you if you give this a try. Really, I would love to hear from it. It was sort of life-changing for me. Maybe it'll be life-changing for you too. And it saved us money too. I love y'all so much. Thanks for hanging out in the kitchen with me, and I'm going to talk to you real soon, okay? Bye!